It was a sweltering summer afternoon when the pristine glass doors of the Sapphire Crest Hotel swung open, revealing a young woman who didn't look like she belonged to the opulent world surrounding her. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as she approached the grand reception desk. Her name was Emily. She carried herself with quiet confidence despite her modest appearance. A simple sundress, a faded backpack slung over her shoulder, and strands of blonde hair sticking to her face from the heat. The receptionist, Amanda, a sharp-featured woman with a razor-sharp tongue, took one look at Emily and smirked. Her tailored suit and air of superiority were weapons she wielded with precision. This girl, Amanda thought, didn't belong here. The Sapphire Crest wasn't just any hotel. It was a sanctuary for the elite, a haven for the wealthy, and a fortress against the common folk. Emily stepped up to the counter and smiled politely. "Hi, I'd like to check in, please." Amanda arched a perfectly manicured brow, her tone laced with condescension. "Are you sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? The budget motel is a couple of blocks down." Emily's cheeks flushed, but she stood her ground. "I'm in the right place. I have a reservation." Amanda sighed dramatically, flipping through her computer with an exaggerated show of reluctance. "Name? Emily Brooks." Amanda's fingers clicked against the keyboard. A frown creased her forehead as she scanned the screen. "We don't have an Emily Brooks listed here. Are you sure you made the reservation? You know, sometimes people dream big and think they can afford places like this." Emily's patience thinned. "I made the reservation, and I have the confirmation email if you'd like to see it." Amanda waved a dismissive hand. "Email confirmation means nothing. Anyone can fake one. Let's be real here, you're not exactly our usual clientele. Why don't you save yourself the embarrassment and leave?" The humiliation burned hot in Emily's chest. She dug into her backpack, pulled out her phone, and thrust it toward Amanda. "Here, check it yourself." Amanda didn't even glance at the phone. Instead, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Honey, this is the Sapphire Crest. Do you even know how much one night here costs? We don't let just anyone walk in off the street." Emily's hand trembled, not from fear but from the sheer frustration of being judged. She opened her mouth to retort when a sharp voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" Both women turned. A man in his late 40s, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, strode toward them. His presence commanded attention, and Amanda immediately straightened, her demeanor flipping into one of forced politeness. "Mr. Carter," Amanda chirped. "There's been a little misunderstanding." Emily froze. The man standing before her was her father, Jacob Brooks. Though their relationship had always been complicated, he owned the Sapphire Crest, and she knew he wouldn't stand for this treatment. Jacob's piercing blue eyes locked onto Amanda. "Misunderstanding?" Amanda hesitated. "This young woman claims she has a reservation, but as you can see," she gestured toward Emily with a sneer. "She's clearly mistaken." Jacob turned his gaze to Emily. Recognition flashed in his eyes, but he said nothing that revealed their connection. Instead, he simply asked, "Do you have a reservation, miss?" Emily nodded, her voice firm. "Yes, I do. Under the name Emily Brooks." Jacob gave a small nod. "Then it seems there's no issue. Amanda, check her in." Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "But, Mr. Carter, she—" "Now," Jacob commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Amanda reluctantly began typing, her face a mask of resentment. "Fine. A single room, I assume?" Jacob interjected. "No, she'll have one of our suites." Amanda's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "A suite?" "Yes, Amanda. Is that a problem?" Amanda swallowed hard. "No, of course not." As Amanda handed over the key card with trembling fingers, Emily took it, her head held high. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence was louder than words. She turned and walked away, her step steady, but her heart raced with a mix of triumph and fury. This was only the beginning. Emily wasn't going to let this insult slide. Not because of her own pride, but because she knew she had to expose the rot beneath the surface of places like this. People like Amanda thrived on unchecked power, And Emily had spent her life watching her father build his empire without understanding the cost to those trampled underfoot. As Emily entered the grand suite, her resolve solidified. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting things right. But she wasn't prepared for what would come next. The skeletons she'd uncover, the alliances she'd form, and the high-stakes battle that would unfold, shaking the Sapphire Crest Hotel to its core. Emily paced the lavish suite, her fingers brushing against the silken curtains, the polished wooden furniture, and the marble countertop of the minibar. The sheer extravagance of the room was a stark reminder of her father's empire, a world she had purposely distanced herself from. But now, she was back, and the fire in her chest demanded action. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen to see a text from her best friend. "Mia, how's the hotel? You okay?" Emily quickly typed back. "It's complicated, but I'm not leaving until I fix this." Emily descended the grand staircase, her head held high. The lobby buzzed with activity. Businessmen barking into phones, tourists gawking at the chandeliers, and staff flitting about in hushed efficiency. Amanda stood at the reception desk, her posture stiff, her lips pursed into a thin line. Emily approached her like a storm brewing on the horizon. "Good morning," Emily said, her tone cool but edged with steel. Amanda looked up, the fake smile plastered across her face barely concealing her disdain. "Oh, it's you. Enjoying your stay?" "Immensely," Emily replied. "I'd like to speak with the manager." Amanda's smile faltered. "Mr. Carter is very busy." Emily leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then tell him his daughter is here." Amanda froze, her eyes darting toward the office door. "Daughter?" Emily crossed her arms, waiting. Amanda stammered out an apology before disappearing into the office. Moments later, Jacob emerged, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said, his voice steady. "Let's talk somewhere private." In his office, Jacob gestured for Emily to sit, but she remained standing. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. "What are you doing here?" he asked, leaning against his desk. "Trying to enjoy a vacation," Emily replied. "But your staff had other ideas." Jacob sighed. "I'll handle Amanda. She'll apologize." Emily's laugh was bitter. "This isn't just about her. It's about everything, the way people like her treat others because they think they can. The way this place thrives on exclusivity while stomping on anyone who doesn't fit the mold." Jacob's jaw tightened. "You don't understand how the business works, Emily. We cater to a specific clientele, and that gives your staff the right to humiliate people?" She shot back. "You've built a palace for the rich and powerful, but at what cost?" Jacob ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. "What do you want me to do?" "Let me work here," Emily said suddenly. Jacob blinked. "What?" "You heard me. I want to work here. Start at the bottom, see what really goes on. I won't tell anyone who I am. Just let me do this." Jacob hesitated. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I know exactly what I'm asking for," Emily said. "Unless you're afraid I'll uncover something you don't want to see." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Jacob finally nodded. "Fine. But don't expect any special treatment." Emily's first shift began at the front desk. Amanda, who had clearly been briefed to keep her behavior in check, handed Emily a crisp uniform. "Try not to embarrass us," she said with a forced smile. Emily smirked. "I'll do my best." Her tasks were mundane, checking in guests, answering phones, and directing inquiries. But it didn't take long for her to see the cracks in the hotel's pristine facade. Staff whispered about unfair workloads, guests complained about overcharges, and the air reeked of silent desperation. One particularly tense moment came when a harried housekeeper named Rosa approached Amanda, nervously clutching a cleaning schedule. "I can't do all these rooms in one shift," Rosa said, her voice trembling. "It's too much." Amanda's response was icy. "Then maybe you're not cut out for this job." Emily watched, her fists clenched, as Rosa retreated, tears brimming in her eyes. It was the same dynamic she had experienced at the front desk. Only now it was clear that Amanda's cruelty extended far beyond her. By the end of her first week, Emily had earned the trust of several staff members, including Rosa and a young bellboy named Daniel. She listened to their stories of mistreatment, long hours, and low pay. Slowly, a plan began to form in her mind. Late one night, she gathered a small group in the break room. "This place needs to change," she said. "But we can't do it alone." Rosa looked skeptical. "What can we do? They'll fire us if we speak out." "They won't fire all of us," Emily said. "We need to stand together, expose what's really going on here." Daniel nodded. "But how do we do that?" Emily smiled, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Leave that to me." Emily spent the next few weeks gathering evidence. Photos of unsafe working conditions, recordings of Amanda's verbal abuse, and testimonies from staff. She even managed to capture video footage of a high-ranking manager skimming money from the hotel's accounts. With everything compiled, she approached her father. This time, she didn't ask for permission. She demanded action. "Emily, this could ruin us," Jacob said, his face pale as he reviewed the evidence. "Or it could save us," she countered. "You always taught me to fight for what's right. Now's your chance to prove you meant it." Jacob's gaze softened. For the first time, he saw not just his daughter but a fierce, determined woman standing before him. "All right," he said. "Let's do this." What followed was a storm of media attention. Emily and Jacob held a press conference, exposing the corruption and pledging to rebuild the Sapphire Crest as a place of integrity. Amanda and the corrupt manager were fired, and the staff received better pay and treatment. The journey wasn't easy, and the road ahead was long. But as Emily stood in the lobby, watching Rosa smile for the first time in weeks, she knew it had all been worth it. The Sapphire Crest Hotel had always been a beacon of luxury, but now it was on the verge of becoming something far greater, a symbol of transformation. Emily's actions had sparked a revolution, both within the hotel and beyond its glittering walls. But as the dust settled, the real work began. The hotel's reputation hung by a thread, and both Emily and her father knew they had to rebuild not just its image, but its very foundation. Emily sat in the newly renovated break room with Rosa, Daniel, and a few other staff members. The atmosphere was tense, but it carried a sense of hope. Jacob entered the room, looking uncharacteristically humble. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I know the past few months have been hard, harder than they should have been. And for that, I take full responsibility." The staff exchanged wary glances. Jacob continued, "This hotel was my dream, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really matters, the people who make it all possible. That changes today. Starting now, every decision we make will prioritize fairness, respect, and dignity for everyone here." Emily watched her father closely. His voice lacked its usual commanding tone, replaced instead with genuine regret. She felt a pang of something she hadn't expected, pride. Daniel raised a hand hesitantly. "What about the pay cuts we've been dealing with? And the impossible schedules?" Jacob nodded. "Those were wrong and we're fixing them. Effective immediately, wages will be increased to a fair rate, and scheduling will be adjusted to ensure no one is overworked." Rosa spoke up, her voice trembling. "And Amanda? Will there be more people like her?" Emily stepped in. "That's why we're establishing a staff council, so you all have a voice in how things are run. If there's ever another Amanda, you'll have the power to hold them accountable." The room buzzed with cautious optimism. Emily didn't stop there. She worked tirelessly alongside Jacob to implement changes. They partnered with local organizations to ensure fair hiring practices and launched an employee wellness program. Weekly staff meetings became a norm, giving everyone a platform to voice their concerns and suggestions. The transformation wasn't just internal. Guests began to notice the changes too. The staff were more relaxed, their smiles genuine. Reviews poured in, praising not just the hotel's luxury, but the warmth and hospitality of its employees. Meanwhile, Amanda's story took a darker turn. After being fired, she attempted to sue the hotel for wrongful termination, but Emily's mountain of evidence crushed her claims. Her reputation in the hospitality industry was ruined, and she struggled to find work. One day, Emily spotted Amanda outside a coffee shop, looking disheveled and defeated. Against her better judgment, Emily approached her. "Amanda," she said softly. Amanda looked up, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want? Come to gloat?" "No," Emily replied. "I came to see if you're okay." Amanda laughed bitterly. "Do I look okay?" Emily hesitated. "You made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean you can't start over. Everyone deserves a second chance. If they're willing to change." Amanda's expression softened, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. "Spare me your pity," Emily sighed, handing her a card. "If you ever decide you want help, call me." As she walked away, Emily couldn't help but wonder if Amanda would ever take her up on the offer. Months later, the Sapphire Crest held its grand reopening. The event was a spectacle, with glittering lights, a red carpet, and a guest list filled with influential figures. But for Emily, the real highlight was seeing the staff, dressed to the nines, laughing and mingling with the guests, their confidence radiating. Jacob took the stage to give a speech, but instead of addressing the crowd, he turned to Emily. "This hotel is more than just a business. It's a legacy. And tonight, I want to recognize the person who reminded me what that legacy should stand for. Emily, thank you for showing me what true leadership looks like." The crowd erupted into applause, but Emily's focus was on the faces of the staff. Their smiles were all the recognition she needed. In the weeks that followed, Emily considered her next steps. The Sapphire Crest was thriving, but her work there felt complete. One evening, Jacob found her sitting on the balcony of the suite she had once checked into under such different circumstances. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he asked. Emily nodded. "There's so much more I want to do." This was just the beginning. Jacob smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "Wherever you go, you'll make a difference." "I'm proud of you, Emily." For the first time in years, Emily felt the weight of their complicated history lift. "Thanks, Dad." As Emily packed her bags, she looked around the room one last time. The Sapphire Crest had been a battleground, a classroom, and a home. It had changed her as much as she had changed it. With one final glance at the hotel's glowing facade, Emily stepped into the waiting cab, ready to take on whatever challenge came next. Because if there was one thing she had learned, it was that true change always starts with one person daring to take a stand.